Mock Draft 3.0. Apologize for how late this is between 2 and 3, and also the draft process only being 4 days away from the draft. But for this one, this will be my third one, and also there'll be one more. My final one will be either Wednesday or Thursday, of course, the day before the draft or the day of the draft. But again, I just want to make a quick one. Want to wait, give some time in between, see what happens with free agency, what teams pick up certain players or whatever trades or so forth. But for this one, I'm gonna be hopping into Mock Draft 3.0, and for this one, starting off, I have Bryce Young. From the start, I've said it's going to be going back, back and forth between Bryce Young, C.J. Stroud. You have seen a tad bit of reports of Anthony Richardson being first overall, though I doubt it. But it's basically 50-50 between Young and Stroud. For this one, I don't think you can go wrong either way. I would say Bryce Young is slightly better than C.J. Stroud. I think as a prospect, if I had to choose, I would side with Bryce Young as well, but I can understand why if they went with C.J. Stroud. But for this one, I do have Bryce Young being the number 1 overall pick for the Carolina Panthers. So next, we have the Texans. I'm sticking with C.J. Stroud. I know there's been tons of reports of them saying they were passing out Stroud or passing out a quarterback and taking Will Anderson. And I saw one on Twitter post saying that they are starting to fall in love with Will Levis and that he's starting to become the betting favorite to become the 2nd overall pick for the Texans. I think it's ridiculous. This would be a horrible move if they took Will Levis, especially when you have Stroud and Anderson on the board. I would understand. I would much rather you take one of those other 2 players as opposed to Levis. But for this one, I'm going to be sticking with C.J. Stroud. So next for the Cardinals, I'm going with Will Anderson. Best defensive player on the draft board. If you want to argue Jalen Carter, but I'm also factoring off the field problems. Will Anderson does not have that, so for me, I have him as the best defensive player on the board, and it makes perfect sense for the Cardinals at 3 if they decide to keep this pick, because there's tons of reports of 2 and 3 being possible trades for teams to move up. But for this one, I'm going to stick with the draft order. For the final mock draft, I might do mock trades, but for this one, I'm going to stick to where it is now, and I think Will Anderson would be a great pick right here at 3rd. So next for the Colts, I have Anthony Richardson. I think he has a much higher ceiling than Will Levis. I get there's both have concerns of if they can translate it to the NFL, especially for Anthony Richardson, his accuracy only being at 54%. But if you're able to capture the ceiling being Josh Allen, this is definitely a risky pick you want to take a bet on. And who knows, in a few years we might be looking back and saying in a redraft that hey, Anthony Richardson is a clear-cut number 1 pick because of how great he is. But at the same time too, also it could be a massive bust. But I think this is a chance that I think teams should be willing to take. This might be a tad bit too high for him if you want to argue, but for this one I do have Anthony Richardson going to the Colts. So next for Seahawks, it kind of ruins their plans because it looks like the obvious pick is Anthony Richardson to Seattle. Them having a luxury pick with, thanks to the Denver Broncos having the 5th overall pick, it would make perfect sense to get your franchise guy here. I don't think they're in love with Will Levis. Who knows? They could take him, but for me, it seems like they are more sought on Anthony Richardson. But for this one, I'm going to go with Jalen Carter. Might be too high because of all his off the field problems, especially with his pro day being out of shape and stuff like that. But I think with his upside, I think it's a chance a team is willing to take, and it's hard to pass up on. Again, if you want to, what I said for Will Anderson, if you can go back and forth between him and Jalen Carter as the best defensive player in this draft, the only knock on him is his off the field problems. That's why I have Will Anderson going first. If that wasn't the case, we would probably be talking about Jalen Carter being 3rd overall. But for this one, I think this is still with massive upside. You just have to really hope that especially his pro day, his coming out of shape, overweight, that's just a hiccup, and he learned his lesson, and you can really fix him with that. So next for the Lions, easy pick. I have Devin Witherspoon. You just traded Jeff Okudah to the Falcons. You have to find someone to replace him, and I think this is a great spot right here. You could also go Christian Gonzalez at this spot. I wouldn't be upset with that. But for this one, I have Devin Witherspoon. So next, for the Raiders, I have Will Levis. For this, they've come out and said they are not opposed to taking a quarterback, even though they just signed Garoppolo to a 3-year deal. I can completely see them taking Will Levis at this spot here. For one, it buys Josh McDaniels some time. Now, depending on how his success goes with Jimmy Garoppolo, but also we know the injury history with him. He seems to get banged up a lot, so there's a chance that you could see Will Levis, if he does go to the Raiders, play in his rookie season. For that, I'm sure they could, if he plays well, I'm sure they could probably move off of Garoppolo pretty quickly and move on to the Will Levis era for this. But for that, and again, massive upside too. Even though I said Anthony Richardson has a higher ceiling, still, again, strong arm, athletic. Definitely that you can really have the building blocks there to make him a great quarterback. Biggest questions are, of course, can he translate into the NFL, similar to Anthony Richardson? Also, the concerns of how come he couldn't win out the job for Penn State. Now, granted, you can look at years back. I mean, the most recent one, obviously, is Joe Burrow. 2020 leaves Ohio State to go LSU, balls out, becomes the first overall pick, and is playing amazing in the NFL right now. So it's definitely not a huge knock on somebody for not winning your starting job at your original college, but it is a concern nonetheless for some teams. But I do have Will Levis going to the 7th overall pick spot to the Raiders. So next for the Falcons, I'm going to go with an edge rusher here. I'm going to go with Tyree Wilson. A lot of people are high on him, got massive upside, very athletic defensive end. I've seen some reports say that they believe that he can be, he has the potential to be the best defensive player in this draft. But of course, stiff competition between Carter and Will Anderson. But for this one, I think regardless, defensive line, especially edge rusher, is key for defense. You could argue offense, but I think I wouldn't be shocked if maybe they went wide receiver, maybe Jackson Smith. But I think for this spot, I think a defensive pick right here is definitely a good spot for 8. So if number 9 for the Bears, I have Skoronski. I really thought they were going to get Orlando Brown in free agency, especially with, it made perfect sense. They had the most cap. He wanted a ton of money. It made perfect sense. Instead, at least I was shocked that the Bengals took him. Now, granted, he had to take less money than what he was asking for. But regardless, I think you need to find your tackle to protect Justin Fields. You already got during the first overall pick trade, you did get DJ Moore in return, so you got a quality number 1 wide receiver for Fields. Get him protection. So I think this makes perfect sense for them right here. Next for the Eagles, I have Bijan Robinson. I view this similar to Ezekiel Elliott in 2016. This might be this might be too high for a running back regardless to be taken. But I look at this similar to, I guess, in this draft to what I just said for the Seahawks with the luxury pick. These are Super Bowl runner-ups. They were just fell short of winning a championship and also having a top 10 pick. It's definitely a huge luxury to have, and I think definitely Robinson's not going to be available the next time they pick at 30. It makes perfect sense to take a swing on this 10th overall pick spot. Bijan Robinson could definitely be an instant impact. There are some reports of Derrick Henry that not official yet, but that he might be going to Philadelphia. That is not 100% sure, nor is it confirmed. So for right now, I do have Bijan Robinson. Again, when I make my final mock draft, this could definitely change depending on how things go. So for the Tennessee Titans, if we look at offensive line, Osiris Torrance, Alva, if I pronounce it right, I apologize for that, and Schmitz, I think is a little bit too high for the 11th spot here. Offensive tackle, I think, is a little bit. Actually, I'm gonna go with this. I'm gonna go with Paris Johnson Jr. because they need to find someone to replace Taylor Lewan. I know I was about to say, oh, well, it's a little too high, but that, split second, just thinking way too fast. But for this one, I do have Paris Johnson Jr. going to the Tennessee Titans. Even though this might be a little bit too high for him, I think it's important to protect the quarterback. You could definitely go, wide receiver here, and I wouldn't have a problem with it. But for this one, I do have Paris Johnson Jr. going this one. Again, I know I was about to just say, I think it's a little bit too high, but I definitely think tackle is the right spot to go, regardless of who it might be. Malik Willis, there's been rumors that they are one of the top landing spots for Trey Lance, so we'll see what happens with that. Next, we have the Texans. Easy pick. I have Jackson Smith and Jigba. I saw a reporter or an analyst talk about this in his mock draft, and it made perfect sense to me. If you are taking CJ Stroud, who's a wide receiver he's going to be most comfortable with? Obviously, it's going to be Jackson Smith and Jigba, coming from the same college, being teammates. They have the best chemistry together. No doubt, of all the receivers in this draft class. Why wouldn't you get his teammate and pair him up with that? You look at the other signings. They had Nico Collins. They just brought in Robert Woods. Mechie's coming back after he missing his entire rookie year with illness. So definitely, stacking the offensive talent around CJ Stroud is definitely key, and no doubt bringing his teammate in, who he's most familiar with, is definitely a big pick right here. So I think if you're a Texans fan, this is a huge A+, I think, for the first round, getting your franchise guy and also getting a great wide receiver. Many people regard him as the number one wide receiver in this class. So next we have the Jets. I have Darnell Wright. I think, tackle is definitely a weak spot for them. And regardless who it's going to be, Aaron Rodgers, it's not officially done yet. Zach Wilson or whoever it might be, I think trying to bolster that offensive line is key. Similar to what I said with the Tennessee Titans and Chicago Bears. You need to protect your quarterback. So next for the Patriots, I have Brian Branch. Again, it's especially for Devin McCourty retiring. I think it's key to really find someone to replace him. No doubt, instant impact. Played great at Alabama. I think he'll fit in perfectly with that Bill Belichick defense. So next for the Packers, Dalton Kincaid. Again, I've paid it for my whole process. It's been a long time since you find your long-term tight end for the Packers, and no doubt Kincaid could definitely be that. So next for the Commanders, I have Christian Gonzalez. I think right now it's, especially with him on the board, so I think it's tough to not pick him. It's tough to pass up on him. May not be a huge need, but again, for Christian Gonzalez, I think you can fit him in the secondary, and he'll be a great pick. Similar to what I just said, you can argue he's the number one corner in this draft class, and seeing that Devin Witherspoon went 6th overall in my mock draft, I think this is definitely a steal at 16 for Gonzalez. You could argue he'd probably go much higher, but for now, right now I have him at 16. So next for the Steelers, I'm gonna go with, and this is you can definitely go different ways with this. I can definitely see Anton Harrison for this spot, but for this, I'm gonna go with Joey Porter Jr. I feel like the history with his father and the whole Steelers organization, I feel like it's gonna compel him to take him at 17 if he does fall to them. I don't know, it might not be the best idea because I believe tackle is probably a better spot, but I just feel like they're going to get too caught up in the whole story with his son or his father, and now having a son on the same team. Years later, I think they'll probably take Joey Porter Jr. in my opinion. At least for right now, I think they will stick with Porter Jr. at 17. So next for the Lions. Like I said, we had Witherspoon going 6th overall. What else do we have going to them? I'm going to go with Nolan Smith. And I'm, alongside with Aiden Hutchinson, who had a spectacular rookie season. Could have made the argument easily that he should have won Defensive Rookie of the Year. Nolan Smith can definitely be a great piece on the other side of the line. Tad bit undersized. He was injured last year, but I think regardless, he is definitely. I think Campbell can really fit him in that defense. I think defense, these first 2 picks is key. I won't be upset maybe if you said wide receiver, especially with the suspensions with Williams and so forth. But I think for right now, I think defense on the first 2 picks of the first round is definitely a huge thing. It was your weakness for the season. They did pick it up towards the end, but I think if they played how they did towards the end for the whole season, they would have made the playoffs. How far they went, I don't know, but I think definitely Nolan Smith and Witherspoon for your first 2 picks is definitely a big, great sign in going the right direction. Sorry, fumbling words there. Great, going the right direction with that. So next for the Buccaneers, I have Kelsey. Pair him up with Vita Veda. Again, ever since that Super Bowl win, the defense has kind of fallen off a little bit each year, especially with now Devin White asking for a trade. Who knows what's going to happen with him? I don't know if he's going to sit out, if he's going to continue to play. But for now, I think any pick on the defensive side of the ball is key. You could again you can make the argument for offense, but I think for right now for quarterback looks like they're settled on Kyle Trask and Baker Mayfield. I think they were one of the teams that was a destination for Trey Lance. Don't quote me on that. But for now, it seems like they're okay with rolling with Trask and Baker Mayfield. Tight end, I could definitely see that here, but I like Otman, the rookie last year. I think he played solid, but I think this would be a great pick on, especially for the defensive line. Kelsey, pair him up with Vita. So next for the Seahawks. This is a little bit of a tricky one because I want to go defensive line, but they still have they have people that produce well, still young, on that team, and also I just went with Jalen Carter with the fifth overall spot. I was originally going with Myles Murphy, but it kind of seems a little redundant to do that. So for this one, I'm gonna throw an interesting one out there. I'm gonna go with Jordan Addison for the simple fact of you look at Tyler Lockett getting up there in age. I know he definitely has a great routine of not taking hits, preserving his body, so you can obviously push his career much longer. But he's still getting up there in age. He's still he's in his 30s. I think it's definitely you definitely should look to add pieces around Geno Smith and also whoever might be in the future. We already know Geno Smith's going to be there for the next 3 years if he can still continue to play how he did last season. But I think adding a wide receiver here is definitely key. Again, you don't know how long you're going to have Tyler Lockett for, how much longer. And especially with adding Jordan Addison, I think it's definitely a great pick at the spot 20. Again, it might not be a huge need, but I don't see Myles Murphy. I think it's a little bit redundant seeing that you just got Jalen Carter at the 5th overall pick spot. Deonte Banks, I don't think corner is a huge need for them. I would have said maybe tight end here with definitely with Noah Fant not being the guy. But for this one, I think Jordan Addison is a great pick. I'm high on him, and I definitely think the way the NFL is going with just offensive heavy minded, especially in that division. I think adding as many weapons as you can around Geno Smith for right now to maximize him is definitely key. And that's a great trio right there: DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, and Jordan Addison. So next, of course, we're passing on Miami, the forfeit for the Chargers. Next, I do have Deonte Banks. Wide receiver could definitely be a big piece right here, or big spot right here, especially because no doubt with Keenan Allen with his age, injury, contract. But I think secondary is big need. If you especially watch the playoff game, Lum blowing the huge lead, the defense definitely fell apart there. Also, no doubt Justin Herbert and all of them definitely have some blame on that part, but it's mostly on the defense. And I think definitely getting the cornerback position is key. J.C. Jackson doesn't look like it's panning out. It seemed like you way overspent on him. And I think finding someone to help in that secondary is definitely a big thing right here. So next for the Ravens, I'm going to go with Quinn Johnston. Adding more pieces around Lamar Jackson. I don't know if they're going to get DeAndre Hopkins. It wasn't his demands that he wanted Odell and Hopkins. They did get Odell. I don't know if they are going to get Hopkins. Who knows? But I think getting a wide receiver spot at the spot is definitely big to try and patch the bridge that has been burned for right now, if it's even possible. This will be the first time they've drafted a offensive weapon since 2019, the first round. Last one being, of course, Marquise Brown. Getting a big receiver here, 6'4", great speed. Can definitely pair him up with Odell Beckham, but also too, we don't know how long if he's going to last the whole season or not. So getting Quentin Johnston for the wide receiver help is definitely, I think, a big spot right here. So next for the Vikings, I'm going to go with a a surprising one. And I've heard this too thrown out as well. I'm going to go with Hendon Hooker because it looks like he's getting hyped up more and more to be the first round quarterback. And here's why. I don't know how much longer Kirk Cousins is going to be there. It seems like people are starting to get annoyed with them. Not really sure. Of course, the big thing is, not good in the primetime games. But I think they want to move into a different direction, especially not spending a ton of money at that spot. And they will look at a future guy. I think Kirk Cousins, in my opinion, his time is running out here with Minnesota. And I think looking towards the future, is definitely plausible. You could definitely pick Myles Murphy here. I wouldn't have a problem. Anyone on the defense side of the football is a huge, I wouldn't complain whatsoever if you said defense. But I think, if you really, same thing what I said, or what I think for quarterbacks, if you really are in love with a guy and you really believe he's your franchise guy, you take him. Obviously, the big thing is Hendon Hooker just being up there in age, one of the older rookies at 25. So you can't sit him for too long. And for this one, he might sit maybe a year, 2 max. But for this one, I do have Hendon Hooker taking their franchise guy and eventually moving off of Kirk Cousins sooner rather than later. Again, I know defense is definitely a huge need because they were the worst in the NFL. But more importantly, you have to look at the quarterback position, which is the most important position in the league. So next for the Jaguars, I'm going to go with Myles Murphy. Again, I don't think they need too much on the offensive side of the ball. Definitely get you, of course, you have the luxury of, they did trade for Calvin Ridley, and he's coming back. So for weapon-wise, I think they're good there. Evan Ingram, getting tight end spot is good. You could argue maybe offense right here, or offensive line, but I think, helping on the defensive side of the ball is definitely a key spot here. You can probably get offensive line later in the draft, but I think Myles Murphy at 24 is a solid pick. So next, we have the Giants. I'm going to go with Zay Flowers. Again, surrounding Daniel Jones with talent is definitely a big spot, especially with the controversy of him getting the big contract that he did. You want to see if he really is the guy. Now, they added Darren Waller a month or two ago in a trade, which is definitely huge, especially if he can stay healthy, which is one of the better tight ends in the NFL. And I think adding Zay Flowers, no doubt being the best wide receiver in their draft room, will be a huge upgrade. Personally, me as a Bills fan, I love Isaiah Hodgins. It sucks that he left. He definitely played well, especially when he was with the Giants, when he stepped up and had to. So I think that's a great, pickup for Hodgins. And also with Zay Flowers at 25 here. Many people are very high on him. Some people say he is the number 1 wide receiver in this draft class. And I think this is a great pick right here at 25. So next for the Cowboys. Running back, I think Jahmyr Gibbs is a little bit too high for this one. They have Tony Pollard for 1 year. Worst case scenario, you go into next year's draft and you take a running back, or you go in free agency next offseason and you take one. Say that some are going to be available. You might have Saquon, Josh Jacobs, or they could re-sign Tony Pollard. But for this one, it's a tricky one. Look on the board. I mean, they don't really need tight. I mean, I don't want to say tight end's a huge need. They did lose Schultz, but I don't want to say like that's a huge need right now. I think offensive line is definitely a big need here. And I'm going to go with Osiris Torrance. The offensive line is definitely, breaking down slowly with some of our top players getting up there in age. I think it's definitely big to try and rebuild that offensive line. And I think Osiris Torrance, regarded as the best interior offensive line in the draft, or at least at the guard position, I think it's definitely a pick here. It's not a flashy one, no doubt. But I think it's more important to try and rebuild the offensive line. Zach Martin's getting up there in age. Smith, constantly riddled with injuries, is getting up there in age. I think you definitely need to look forward into the future. You lost Connor to the Bills, who we're just on right now, to free agency. So I think this is definitely a great pick here. Again, not a flashy pick, not a one that people are probably going to jump out of their seats, but I think this is definitely a need, no doubt, for the offensive line. So now for my Bills. We do have Mike Mayer on the board, and there was times where they have talked to some of the top tight ends in the draft class. I think this is redundant to take a tight end here. You don't use Dawson Knox a lot, which you should. I think he's one of the best tight ends in the NFL, in my opinion, given the opportunity. It's redundant to take a tight end here. If you're not going to use Dawson Knox a lot, you're probably not going to use whoever you draft at tight end at this spot too. So it's a waste of a pick. Cornerback, I don't think we need defensive line or anyone in defense. I don't like at this spot. Maybe linebacker here is the only exception I think for defense. But for right now, we have Broderick Jones, we have Anton Harrison. Wide receiver, you don't have anyone here. I think Josh Downs is a little bit of a reach at this spot. Jahmyr Gibbs, again, you have James Cook, Damon Harris. I don't see the reason to pick one here. So for this one, I actually am going to go with Anton Harrison. Spencer Brown was disappointing last year. Again, he was banged up, but he was disappointing, no doubt. And I think you have to find some help for Josh Allen on the offense. And I think Anton Harrison anyone on the offensive line is definitely huge for Allen. If you've watched games, especially for me, being a Bills fan, Allen doesn't have a lot of time. Every time he snaps the ball, defensive players are constantly all over him, and adding some type of help on the offensive line is something. How three of our offensive linemen made that a Pro Bowl, I don't know how, especially for Saffold. But anyone on the offensive line is definitely huge here. So I have Anton Harrison going to the Bills at 27. So for 28, I do have Michael Mayer. Their tight end is a gap, is definitely a need for them. Losing Hurst in free agency, and no doubt Mike Mayer is a great pickup here at 28. You can argue he's the number one tight end in this draft class, but for this one, I have Kincaid going over Michael Mayer. But I think it's a great spot here, adding another great piece for Joe Burrow with right now Ja'Marr Chase, T. Higgins. We don't know the status of Joe Mixon. They've asked him to take a pay cut. We don't know if that's going to happen or not, so there's a chance that he might get cut. But for right now, he's on the team, so I will add on Joe Mixon. So that's a great offensive receiving core, no doubt. And definitely will get a ton of opportunities along, with defenses having to worry about Chase and Higgins. So next for the Saints, I'm going to go with I'm trying to think here. I'm actually going to go with Broderick Jones. We lost Terrence Armstead to free agency last offseason. I think trying to find someone to replace him is key, and I think Broderick Jones is definitely a great pickup here, especially helping Derek Carr out. So for this one, again, not a flashy pick, but I think this is definitely a need for that spot to replace Armstead. So with the first pick in the first round, again, like I said, there's no way Bijan Robinson was going to last all the way to 30. We picked him at 10. What do we have at 30? I do have linebacker at this spot. And I'm going to go with Drew Sanders, a big-bodied linebacker, 6'5", can definitely fit into that defense, especially with the ton of free agents they had this offseason. I think it's definitely a huge need for the linebacker they took in Georgia last year. I think not Nolan Smith. I forget his name offhand. I apologize. Small, 5'11", not a big linebacker. So I definitely think for a spot right here, adding Drew Sanders at 6'5" is definitely a big pickup here. Again, I think linebackers are probably more likely in the 20s and lower. No doubt for my Bills can definitely be a team that could take one. Maybe Giants. But for this one, I do have the Eagles taking a linebacker, a defensive player at 30. You already had your luxury pick with Bijan Robinson, so it makes sense with Drew Sanders at 30. So finally, with the Super Bowl champs, what do they take at 31? This is a luxury pick because it's definitely. I think offense is more of a need here. I can definitely see a wide receiver here, Josh Downs. But for this one, I have seen a mock draft take this. I'm going to go with Darnell Washington. For the simple fact of Travis Kelce is getting up there in age. At 33, you don't know how much more he can produce. And I think finding his next future replacement is definitely key. 6'7". Again, big body tight end. Size-wise, of course, being bigger than Kelce. Not saying he'll be better than him, but definitely this is a luxury pick. Again, it's maybe not, he's not worthy of a first-round pick, but again, at 31, with the last pick in the first round, being the defending Super Bowl champs, I think you can kind of just take a swing at anybody because most cases, the next time they do pick, most of these guys aren't going to be on the draft board, or if not all of them aren't going to be on the draft board, the ones that are remaining on offense. You could go Josh Downs here. I won't complain whatsoever. But I think for Darnell Wright, this could definitely be, looking towards a future to replace Travis Kelce. Again, getting up there in age, I don't know how much longer he can keep going. It looks like for right now, he's still going as strong as ever. But I think adding a piece like that, no doubt, I think Andy Reid can definitely find ways to put Darnell Washington in schemes and definitely get him mismatches and really produce on that offense for now, and then in the future stepping up to be the starting tight end. But for this one, this will be this is my mock draft 3.0. My last one will be either the Wednesday or Thursday, depending on how when I'm able to put one out. But for this one, is my quick overview of the mock draft 3.0 again. Just giving you a quick look on the whole first round. But that's it. Let me know your thoughts down below. If you agree with my picks, if you don't, what players do you have going, higher or lower? If you are, depending on what for your team, who would you rather have instead of the player I did pick? Or if you did like the pick I had for your team, let me know down below. With that being said, thank you for watching. I'll see you next one.